Hey, it's Don. On this episode of The Naturalist, we're visiting Caesars Creek State Nature Preserve, and we're going to witness some invasive species management and take a look at some highlights that you can see if you visit this spot. So let's go. The first thing we'll do today is meet up with a group from Wilmington College, a faculty member and students who are here doing invasive species management, something they've done on this preserve for a long time. Then after that, I'll take a walk around some of the trails here at the gorge and show you just a few of the highlights that you can see if you were to visit here.
I am Kendra Cipollini. I'm a biology professor at Wilmington College in Wilmington, Ohio. Go Quakers! And I'm here today with my class for a service learning exercise. We are coming here to Caesar Creek Gorge to help them get rid of this invasive species. Amber honeysuckle, which is a species that I've done research on. Students have been coming here since 2004 to help them clear the honeysuckle for the native species here.
So what's the problem with honeysuckle? Where did it come from, and what's the big deal with it?
So, amber honeysuckle is what we call invasive species. It is here, it was brought here from China. As a landscape plant. It has pretty flowers, it has nice berries in the winter. It was brought here to put in people's gardens and pretty quickly escaped to natural areas. So this part of Southwest Ohio has a lot of amber honeysuckle this time of year, which it's mid-April right now. It's one of the only things that's green and it really dominates the understory. So a lot of what you're looking at now is areas we've cleared before and we've been clearing this week. You can look at other parts of the park to see a real honeysuckle infestation, or just look up that way where you can see the students are starting to tackle some of that honeysuckle. So it comes out really early. It shades out all the native species underneath it. It also has allelochemicals, which are chemicals that can inhibit growth of plants around it. It not only affects the understory plants, but can also affect tree growth. Tree growth is slowed down in a honeysuckle infested woodlot. And then it also affects wildlife too. The berries are not very nutritious. Birds will leave them on for a long time, which tells you they're not the preferred choice for them to eat. But also, if a bird nests in a honeysuckle versus a native shrub like a spice bush would be native around here, the predators can climb the architecture of the honeysuckle better and predate the nest. So bird nesting is affected by the presence of honeysuckle as well. So it affects a variety of different components of the ecosystem, as well as ecosystem functions such as nutrient cycling. Nitrogen cycling is affected, and it can affect the aquatic communities around it. When these leaves end up in a stream, those allelochemicals leach into the stream, and the aquatic communities, the insects particularly, can be affected by that.
So how do you deal with it?
So there's a variety of different methods. You could bring in a biocontrol. One reason why this species is so successful is because it was brought over from China, but its enemies were not. So there are no things that really eat it. There might be some. We're sort of discovering maybe some viruses that will attack it. But for the most part, nothing attacks it. It has no enemies. That allows it to grow unfettered in its invaded habitat. And so we could bring over an insect from China to eat it, one that eats it in China. We could bring it over, but then you have the possibility of that insect eating non-target species. So we don't have a viable biocontrol for it right now. So a lot of what we're doing for control is just old-fashioned human power, where we are doing today what we call cut and paint, where we just cut it and then it's painted with an herbicide on the trunk after we leave by the personnel here that have an herbicide license. And it's a really targeted herbicide application. A lot of people worry about herbicide application, but it's really just to the stump, and if you do not treat it, it sprouts back vigorously and you've wasted a lot of your work that day. So, you know, in the course of ecological restoration, we do use herbicides judiciously, and this is one of the examples where it is used to help. It helps more than it hurts in this situation. The other thing that you can do is, because it comes out really early, it's the only thing that's green in in late October or really early spring, you can foliar spray with an herbicide. That has more possible non-target effects and you're using more herbicide, but it can get a larger area in a particularly infested area. So people will do that as well. But today we're here, we're just cutting and painting. The students are cutting using these high-tech tools like saws and loppers. And then, as I said, the people with a pesticide license will come by and apply that later. It has to be done today before you have to apply it somewhat soon after you cut it. So the stump takes it up.
So how long have you come to this preserve to do this?
Yeah, I think I mentioned I've been coming here since 2004.
So how many acres do you think you've done at this point?
Oh, I have no idea.
And then what's happened to the areas where you've done this? Have they recovered, or has the honeysuckle come back, or what happened?
Mostly the honeysuckle stayed out. One good thing about this invasive species is that it's a shrub, and so it's relatively slow growing. It's not like an herbaceous invasive plant that would come back more readily, so it is a little slow growing. Of course, they've come through and they treat them as they come up now, but overall it stayed pretty clear. I mean, you can walk around. That whole area down there was all full of honeysuckle. Even here, like down to the trail, was all full of honeysuckle. We've been slowly working our way. For years we used to work more up the hill. All that is cleared still, and we're not seeing new invasives come in, and we are seeing species in the understory that are benefiting. You can see a lot of buckeyes around here that are being left, so those will thrive. And then some of the wildflowers, like right here in front of you is a mayapple. That patch will of course do better and grow bigger because we have cut the honeysuckle down around it. So there are still a lot of legacy plants. It sort of depends on how long the honeysuckle's been there and what the land use was as to how rich the understory is. Some of the places that we worked on over there on the bank had a lot of things in the understory, and there's a lot of wildflowers over there now, so we can see the fruits of our labor.
So just kind of in concluding, is this something that we will ever win? I mean, can we get rid of all the honeysuckle here at this preserve and it is gone? It won't come back, or what happens?
No, you can control it, but you can't eradicate it. So it'll always be here at a low level, but again, it's kind of good because it's a woody plant, so it's relatively slow growing compared to an herbaceous plant. So once you get rid of it, it's going to take 10 years to get this size again, or maybe 8 years. So this is 8 years of growth we're getting rid of. More than that, you think? Okay.
We'll test that. Well, you can cut one down and we'll count the rings. Yeah. So, okay, well, thanks. I'm going to take some footage of your students working and talk to the preserve managers, but good work.
Thanks.
My name's Elijah Cathy. I'm with the Wilmington College here. I'm with my teacher, Kendra. We're out here at the Nature Preserve site, cutting down some invasive species, the honeysuckle, and I'll show you how that gets done.
Okay.
Yep. Right here, do about 6 inches above the stump, just so they can spray it once it gets cut. And then just chop a turn.
Oh, really?
Yep.
And boom. And then we just set the big branches on the ground and just let the crew come get it when it's done. And they'll spray it, and then it won't be able to grow. So yeah, that's all that's happening here.
Is it satisfying to do that?
Honestly, it is. It's a workout. I got the big tool.
You got the big one.
Quick to choose this one. Gets the job done fast. And yes, it's a good thing to do for the environment. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir.
I'm Cece Harding. We're with Kendra, obviously.
So she's going to demonstrate using the saw, take down honeysuckle.
Yep. Oh,
that one is loose.
yes!
Wow, that was like magic. Okay, why don't we...
We'll demonstrate on different...
Yeah, there's one right behind there. Yeah, just pull that one maybe up in that direction. So yeah, what do you do with after you cut them, what do you do with them?
You chuck them. You just get them out of here because the person who's coming next, they gotta fix it and get the herbicide.
Right, spray the stumps. Okay,
Yeah.
you can demonstrate, on one of those.
Yeah, this one. There's 2 in here. Just chop it.
So is that wood, is it hard to cut, or is it pretty soft, or how would you
It's
characterize
actually
it?
pretty, once you get past the bark, it's pretty soft. Like you can feel it. It's like squishy, but the stems, these ones are hollow. And that's how you know that's honeysuckle.
Right, the twigs, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a look at the end of it. All right, that's not hollow for sure once they're that big. Yep.
No, but it's not that hard to cut into, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a lot worse.
Okay, well, good. Keep it up, though, and I'll be back around later. Okay, thanks.
My name is Mandy. I'm one of the educators here at the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves. I work out in the West District, which is a huge district, and today we are at Caesar Creek Gorge State Nature Preserve. We're very close to the state park, but not connected. We are on Caesar Creek that flows into the Little Miami. So this preserve not only preserves what is in here, but also helps in the long run protect the Little Miami River.
All right, so what's, we've gotten some people on camera now to discuss removal of honeysuckle. So what's the benefit of that? Like, what can we see it helping at this point?
I see it already today. So these kids are coming out and they are cutting back honeysuckle. And when we look down at the ground today, we see why this is important. The honeysuckle causes too much shade. And here we can see in this area that already has honeysuckle cut, this beautiful woodland phlox is coming in. We also have spring beauties blooming out here. Right below me, here we go. And so essentially these flowers, they come out, especially the spring beauty, they do their entire life cycle before the leaves that belong here are coming out. So before the maples, before the oaks, before those big sycamore trees cause too much shade, they have to grow, bloom, be pollinated, produce their seeds, spread themselves all over the place, and then go dormant, all before we have real greenery here in Ohio. And the honeysuckle prevents that. It covers it and it steals their sunlight, and then that kills the life cycle for that beautiful little flower. Not just for the flower, but there is a specialist bee called a spring beauty mining bee that only gets their pollen and nectar from this flower. So if there was a group of mining or those spring beauty mining bees in here and we left all this honeysuckle, they'd have nothing to eat and raise their young on.
Yeah, excellent. So how long in your experience does it take for the native community or the understory community to respond to honeysuckle being removed?
It's pretty amazing. Without having to plant anything, I have seen golden seal pop up within a year of removing honeysuckle and some other invasives. One place that we removed a bunch of honeysuckle, pawpaw trees just came up out of everywhere, and that's our Ohio native fruit. So that's amazing to see. Sometimes we do have to go back through. This is not a one and done kind of a thing. We have to come back through. The garlic mustard will creep in. We got to get rid of that too. Some little honeysuckle babies will pop back up. It takes a lot of effort, but it is so worth it when it's done. Within a couple years, we'll see baby trees that were just barely making it become 6-foot trees. And that's pretty amazing. And it kind of gives you a sense of, I hope for these kids too, just a sense of encouragement to keep working at it.
Sure, accomplishment, and that it's paying off.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
you can see what has happened.
Yeah. Now, is there ever any need to replant with natives in an area, say, that's been heavily infested with honeysuckle for decades?
So it depends on who you are, how you are going to answer that. For me, being a naturalist with natural areas and preserves, part of what our division does is we leave it to nature. We let the natural succession come back in. We rely on that seed bed to bring everything back up. And if you're a homeowner though, you may not feel the same way. You may take down this big row of honeysuckle and now you see the road. So you want something else to go in its place. So they both have their merits, but in the wilderness like this, we are going to leave it natural.
Okay. So it would seem, though, that some species would take an awfully long time to come back, depending on their seed dispersal rate, right? In that event?
I am not honestly sure about that.
Okay.
I do have some great resources, though. We have 2 botanists here at the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves that would be able to speak better on the seed dispersal of each of the species that we have concerns on.
Sure.
I have noticed that garlic mustard, one of our other invasives, it does really well when you cut down some honeysuckle if it's in the area. But as far as our natives, I see things like our violets come back pretty darn fast on the forest floor. I have seen Jack in the Pulpits come back even without replanting. So it probably depends species, but I can get you to one of our botanists to get that answer better.
Okay, thanks.
My name's Eric Sagasser. I work for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Natural Areas and Preserves. I'm a preserve manager. Caesar Creek State Nature Preserve is one of the sites that I help manage. Much of what my job entails is non-native invasive plant species mitigation. So today we have a volunteer group from Wilmington College helping us to do what's known as a cut stump treatment to remove that invasive species. The end goal in mind is to proliferate native flora and fauna and protect this beautiful natural resource we have here for future generations to enjoy.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about where we are exactly? Where are we situated and what are the highlights of this area?
Certainly. So we are right along Caesar Creek, and we're very near the confluence with the Little Miami. So there's a great corridor here between the Army Corps property, State Park property, Division of Wildlife property, Natural Area property, and Scenic Rivers property. So there's a lot of great land protected here for folks to enjoy. So we have many great spring ephemeral species up here right now, but there's something to see here in every season, and I would strongly encourage you to come check it out.
And a little bit about the land use history here. So how was this land used prior to being a preserve?
So much of the land would have been grazed. Some of it was probably farmed, but limited amounts. And probably the most high quality forested areas that we have remaining in the gorge are on the steep sections for obvious reasons. But much of the floodplain is in great condition, and there's a lot of beautiful things to see here.
Sure, and I guess we're really seeing the creek at, I mean, it was at much higher levels not that long ago, right? But it being allowed to,
yes,
use that floodplain and expand into it is key to, affecting downstream flow and everything, correct?
Yep.
Do you only work at this preserve, or do you have other responsibilities?
No, so we cover, when I say we, the West District team for Natural Areas and Preserves, we cover 26 properties, and we range from the border with Indiana over to about Columbus and around Grand Lake down to Cincinnati. There's quite a few properties to enjoy in there. And we're doing land management on most of those, trying to mitigate the invasive species just like we are here today.
Okay, and then so at a preserve like this, how often would you physically get to a preserve in that network?
So it really will depend on the season, what our objectives are for the land. Much of our day-to-day tasks are driven by what is out at that time. So for example, during the winter time, we can go to pretty much any of our preserves and have a lot to do because we can mitigate woody invasive species at that time doing a cut stump type treatment. But obviously some things are only up during the growing season, and then also depending on our treatment techniques, we may try to avoid doing a particular activity during the growing season so that we don't impact non-target species like the flora we're trying to propagate.
Okay, and then basically to conclude, you mentioned the cut stump management method. We've seen the cut part up there.
Sure.
What's the rest of that?
So depending on the product you would use, it can vary a little bit, but essentially what we'll do is we will take a little bit more of a concentrated herbicide solution, and we'll apply that most of the time to just the cambium layer before it seals up. Sometimes we have oil-based products where we can apply it to the cambium layer and the sides down to kind of the root crown even some time after it being cut. But essentially, we're ensuring the plant does not resprout and just continue to impact our native species.
Otherwise, this is not a wasted effort, but it's not as effective as it could be otherwise, right? Yeah.
Right.
All right, well, thanks a lot, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, absolutely.
All right, take care. After spending time with the group, I'm going to take a quick little walk around some of the trails here at Caesar Creek Gorge and show you a few highlights along the way. So one of the species you're trying to protect when you remove an invasive is things like this. This is white trout lily, Erythronium albidum. There is a yellow version of this, Erythronium americanum, and they're one's white petaled and the other's yellow petaled. And so they're pretty common forest understory species where there are moist soils, and these kinds of things will rebound quite a bit when you get rid of that overstory of honeysuckle above them. In this spot we have a buckeye that's loving its release from honeysuckle, but also there's a whole sea of false rue anemones in this area. These little white flowered, low growing plants, and they are doing quite well now that the honeysuckle's been removed. Here we have a bellwort species. This is large flowered bellwort, Uvularia grandiflora. And these are named, the name Uvularia comes from uvula, just like that thing that hangs down the back of your throat, because of the way those flowers hang from the stems of this plant. And that name, by the way, means little grape. So that's where those names come from. Large flowered bellwort. I've dropped down into the floodplain area here along Caesar Creek. I'm seeing a lot of typical floodplain vegetation, cottonwoods, sycamores in terms of trees, but a rich herbaceous community as well. And so here's one I want to point out to you. This is a trillium species. It's commonly known as toad shade or toad trillium, Trillium sessile. And it's one very recognizable because these dark purple flowers, and they sit basically right on the top of the stem against the leaves, and that's the origin of the name sessile. They're sessile, so to speak. Okay, so that's one thing you can see here. In this spot we have a sea of Mayapples. Mayapples are interesting because they're supposed to be an indicator of where you can find morels. It is morel season now, just picking up here in Ohio, in southwestern Ohio. So I'll be watching, although this is a nature preserve, so I won't be picking. But Mayapples are called that because they make a fruit that looks like a little green apple. And here's an example of that on this one. Okay, that's the developing flower that will then become a fruit that looks a lot like that, okay, when it's in fruit. A little green apple, but it's one that you don't want to eat because they can be toxic. Now I'm situated right along Caesar Creek, and I must point out I signed a waiver to be off trail today, so your casual visitor needs to stay on the trails, but we were here for other purposes today. So, but behind me you can see the creek and get the idea of the gorge nature. There is a steep gorge here. You can see the walls lining the creek across the way there, cutting through Ordovician limestone. And we are situated half a mile or so, maybe a mile so below Caesar Creek Dam itself. And that's a very large dam. It impounds an acreage of about, I think, 2,800 acres. And the unfortunate thing about it, although this area is a preserve, a lot of the creek valley looked like this that was buried by that lake. Now that's a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer lake, supposedly a flood control lake, as this Caesar Creek is a tributary to the Little Miami River, which is in turn a tributary to the Ohio River. So it was put in place to staunch the flow of floodwaters downstream. Now we've had a lot of high water here recently. The water is still high, much higher than normal, but it's gone down quite a bit. But if you visited here, you have the opportunity to see lots of birds. I've seen mink playing along this creekside before. And behind me is some of the plant highlights, a few more plant highlights that is. So these are Virginia bluebells at their peak. That's Mertensia virginica. So those are a nice bright blue addition to the spring flora. You can see beaver activity along the creek here. Here's a tree that's been, I can see, revisited numerous times by beavers, where they do this thing occasionally. They don't cut a tree down, but they will debark it around the base essentially that can lead to the girdling of the tree. So they do it partly just to work on their teeth, which are ever growing. So they have to chew on the bark to keep their teeth from growing too long. And so this tree has hung in there in the face of years of that, but they might eventually get to all the live veins to the point where the tree may die. So at that point they may eat the bark from the rest of the tree as well after it falls. But they don't objectively cut it down. They just girdle it like that sometimes. Okay, and right in the nook, I think I'll leave this. This is cut leaf toothwort, Cardamine concatenata. Okay, one of our native mustards that hosts some of our native spring butterflies like the falcate orange-tip butterfly. Here's a good view of an exposed shale clay bank, of course with limestone bedrock ultimately along the creek. This is an area where it's so steep that erosion there keeps plants from growing on the side very easily. And so this has been open like that for as long as I've ever come here, 25 years or so. I had also seen a kingfisher just a bit ago. I was hoping it would come back. All right, moving on. There's lots of blue and purple flowers out this time of year in the woods. And here's a nice one. This is called Jacob's Ladder, Polemonium species. Okay, it has these divided compound leaves and nice blue, kind of bell-like, flared bell-like flowers. I've now moved up to the upland part of the trail here at Caesar Creek Gorge. The creek's quieter in the distance. And in this area you can see some more handiwork of people who've removed honeysuckle throughout the years. Okay, lots of dead honeysuckle on the ground there. And then another species that we haven't seen yet in the riparian area, and that's this one. That's Dutchman's breeches. These finely divided compound leaves and those flowers that look like breeches, pants. They're hanging on a clothesline to dry. Okay, so there are at least 3 species that have flowers like that, somewhat like that. They're related, including Dutchman's breeches, squirrel corn, and bleeding hearts. Bleeding hearts are very difficult to see in the wild now, but you can see the other 2 species in this area quite readily. So here's just a little overview. The creek's now in the distance, in the bottom there. And here's an area, again, been extensively cleared of honeysuckle through the efforts of volunteers and of course the preserve staff. Well, I've reached the top of the preserve and there's a little loop trail you can take at the top, which I will not take today. I need to head back to the car. I'm running out of battery. But here's the junction, trail junction. All right, so we're just going to continue in that direction, but you can decide to take a loop that goes in that direction. And of course, just as I got to this junction, I saw a wild turkey over here, but it was long gone before I had the camera ready. So that's the breaks. But we'll see if we see any more on the way back to the car. As I walk through this part of the preserve, I'm in a sea of red cedars, Juniperus virginianum. And that is a marker that this area was completely open at one point, because they are a colonizing species and they come in first before the hardwoods, and they eventually get out competed by hardwoods over time. But they do provide an interesting habitat while they are present and dominant in these early successional old fields but they eventually get replaced as deciduous trees come in and outcompete them. I'm winding my way back downhill to the parking area and to conclude the episode. And so for today, I'd like to thank Kendra Cipollini and the Wilmington College students, as well as Mandy and Eric of the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves, for all their assistance and educational opportunities they presented today. So until next time, this is the Naturalist signing off. Bye-bye.